15 years ago, BAPA came into existence. 15 years ago, 50 years ago, Martin Luther King made that very iconic speech where he talked about one day that he wishes that his daughters would live in a world where they are not judged by the colour of their skin, but by the character. And as we've just seen, Colin Powell talked about the fact that this whole idea about racism and the fact that you're judged by the colour of your skin, or the fact that you are not able to participate in life, has been going for 200 years. So the issue of racism and how people of colour are treated and discriminated has been going on for longer than 15 years, for longer than 50 years, and for longer than 200 years. And it's something that needs to change, something that we're all responsible for. Challenging racism and discrimination isn't just the job and the responsibility of the Black and Asian Police Association. It is the responsibility of everybody that works within GMP and the responsibility of all those that live and work in the community and the world at large. It's all our responsibility. The next guest I'm going to invite up to the podium is Tony Lloyd, who is Greater Manchester's first Police and Crime Commissioner. Now, the job of the Police and Crime Commissioner is actually to hold the Chief Constable to hold him to account on issues relating to policing and race. And just under 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity of being in attendance to Tony Lloyd's half-term review, where he addressed the attendees at Manchester University and talked about the changes and the implementations of policies and the culture which he's trying to change and implement within the GMP so that they become a better force and that they can relate more to the community in which they serve. And today, Tony's going to talk on his perspective on police and race and how he has kept the Chief Constable accountable around the issues of race and justice. So I'd like to ask Tony up to the podium and for you all to give him a round of applause.
Thanks so much for that. Let me begin, I suppose, by making a very obvious point that anybody who denies that race is an issue in our society doesn't live in this society. We know that with a rising tide, for example, of Islamophobia in modern Britain, this is something that we have to challenge together, and whatever form of racism applies, this is, as Paul Bailey just said before, this isn't simply a task for BAPA, it's a task for everybody in our society, because actually racism in our society affects every aspect of what we do. So let's talk a little bit about those things that I've tried to do along with the Chief Constable over the last couple of years to make that kind of difference. When I came into office, one of the things that I believe very profoundly, I still believe, is that of the things that affect the relationship between the police and the wider community, the issue around the way complaints are handled both externally and internally is fundamental in developing proper trust between the public and the police, and indeed within policing between serving police officers and Greater Manchester Police. I believe as well that stop and search is probably the biggest single issue that does impact upon the way communities generally. It isn't only BME communities, actually this would also apply to other parts of the traditionally white working class community. But where distrust, particularly amongst young people, applies, stop and search is one of the major issues involved. And actually doing something about those issues, I think, is is absolutely fundamental to the journey the Greater Manchester Police is on. If I can take stop and search first of all, probably what I think about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a public session. Assistant Chief Constable Gary Shoon in the room today was part of that session, where we examined the credibility, the structure of stop and search. And one of the challenges that I gave to Assistant Chief Constable that day is one that still does remain. It's about the management of that stop and search process. It's about making sure that stop and search isn't something that simply lies within the power of the constable, important that is, but it is a managed process. Because if we recognise that in some divisions of Greater Manchester, for example, the use of stop and search is much higher than others, that isn't necessarily wrong in itself, but it's something that has to be managed and looked at properly. But I think probably the biggest gain in terms of the debate around stop and search is going to be the introduction of the body-worn videos. It's something that the Chief Constable and I have agreed will be rolled out within Greater Manchester Police. If any single thing I can think about which will change the nature of the relationship between the public and policing, that use of video technology, it isn't a technological fix, but it is something that changes the way that individual police officers and the community will relate to each other, because it provides a record of exchange that will both ensure acceptable, proper standards, hopefully by serving police officers, and ensure as well that the public more generally have assurance around the nature of that exchange, even when that does lead to complaints or concern. That, I believe, is part of the fundamental change in the way policing is done. But I've also got to say this: when I've talked to serving police officers themselves want to have this type of technology available, because this is a protection for them as well as more generally for the public. So that, I think, is a matter of enormous significance and enormous change. Where I would disagree actually with Paul there. Paul was dismissive of things like the Ethics Committee. I can't agree with that as an approach. Two things that we've begun to develop that I hope can make a significant change in terms of the way policing is seen and the trust that policing has. One is the introduction of an Ethics Committee. The second is the introduction, hopefully, of a very different way of looking at complaints. We've asked a retired judge to be part of the oversight of the complaints process, a police ombudsman in effect, or an ombudsman having oversight of the complaints process. Giving that local guarantee of independence within the complaints process, I genuinely believe can make a difference to the way that the public has confidence in that process, as well as the internal processes with Greater Manchester Police. Re-engineering the way complaints are done, I think, is fundamental, because I don't believe the public actually generally has confidence. They don't know, don't understand the internal process, don't trust the internal process. They don't know about the role of the Independent Police Complaints Commission. And these things we've got to change by bringing in that element of independence into the complaints process at the GMP level, and hopefully changing the way that the public relates to those complaints structures. But I don't disagree at all with what Paul Bailey was saying about the issues facing Greater Manchester Police. Those are the ones we ought to share. I have no difficulty whatsoever in accepting that the role of BAPA, as well as other associations, the Muslim Police Association, the Jewish Police Association, etc., challenging Greater Manchester Police on the issue of the treatment of people from the BAPA communities has got to be right. It is I don't disagree with any part of the agenda that Paul Bailey showed us before, because those are issues that we know either historically or still to this day are matters that we've got to begin to get right. We know, for example, that in a community as diverse as that's in modern Greater Manchester, the Greater Manchester Police Force, with only 4% of its employees from BME backgrounds, doesn't reflect the cultures and the communities that exist across our connotation. We do have to change that. We're handicapped, I've got to say, in changing that because of the cuts in policing, which means that the level of recruitment into the Greater Manchester Police is now at a trickle when that doesn't serve the public interest, and it doesn't serve the interest either of changing that ethnic composition. But the good news in that is that over the last few years, there's been a significant change in recruitment, at least as far as those parts of GMP that are being recruited goes. PCSOs, for example, in the first 2 quarters this year, the number of people from BME backgrounds joining up as PCSOs is now up to 40, a little short of 40%. Now that's a significant change, but it's significant for another reason. It's significant because we know the most likely recruitment at the moment into Greater Manchester Police is going to come from groups like the PCSOs. Amongst apprentices that GMP have taken on over recent times, the figure is as high as 40% again of apprentices from BME backgrounds. That's a significant change to what was taking place in the past. It doesn't resolve every issue that GMP faces, we know. We've still got to recognise that when the perception exists that the disproportionality isn't simply believed to be there, but is there, and we know it's there, that has to be driven through. And actually, I do think training is an important part of that process. I do think screening, by the way, is an important part of that process. And I think that kind of challenge through me to the Chief Constable, from the Chief Constable through the different structures within GMP is an important part of bringing about that kind of change, because the disproportionality does affect the views of BME officers and indeed others if they feel that they are singled out for different kinds of treatment to those of other serving police officers. So we know that there is still an issue to be taken forward there. We know across all of the range of issues internally that GMP faces, we've still got to allow for the fact that the process of whistleblowing is both, whilst legally enshrined, isn't yet something that people always feel comfortable with. We've got to make sure that the role of the whistleblower is properly structured. And I've spoken to the Chief Constable about this. Clearly, one of the things that we need to have is a protocol around whistleblowing that ensures that there is a proper structure within which the whistleblower can be treated in a way that gives them confidence to come forward. Because clearly, actually in any organisation, using the power of the whistleblower to bring about transformation and change is not simply one that we've described as important. It's fundamental in rooting out problems that do exist, whether minor or of huge importance. In terms of recruitment and promotion, transparency within those processes, I think, is fundamental to make sure that people have confidence that where people are asked to take on tasks, that process is one that ensures confidence of colleagues, but also confidence within the community. So that transparency process is a part of that. In the relatively short space of time, because I understand that you'd like me to take some questions, which of course I'm happy to do, we'll probably finish at this point. But I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. If you want to pick up the Colin Powell point, we are not a society yet where every person from every background is treated with fairness. We've not achieved in Britain the Martin Luther King's dream of a society where there is racial justice and racial equality. That's simply not the case. And we have to challenge racism. We have to challenge all forms of discrimination in our society on an ongoing and continuous basis. That's the duty, not simply of people from BME backgrounds, it's the duty of every citizen in modern Britain, because in a community like those across Greater Manchester, unless we can achieve a sense of genuine equality, genuine fairness, genuine mutuality and understanding, we're wasting the potential of individuals, and we're weakening the type of community that we're there for. Now, I nevertheless travel with confidence on these issues. Confidence that actually working together will make a difference. Confidence because if we don't have that confidence, actually coming here together today this morning is a waste of everybody's time. Confidence actually that says that if we can genuinely work with those who want to have that respectful debate that Mr. Bailey invited us to, we can challenge the issues that we need to challenge together, and in challenging them we can face down those who would frustrate us building that better police force which serves the kind of community